The American frontier was a land where law was only as strong as the man holding the gun. Beyond the Mississippi, the rules blurred and the line between lawman and outlaw often vanished entirely. This was a world of dust and greed, courage and cruelty, where fortune was fleeting and justice was often just another kind of revenge. Most remember the legends: Jesse James, Billy the Kid, Butch Cassidy, men whose names became myths, whose crimes turned into folklore. But for every famous gunslinger who made the headlines, there were dozens more who lived, fought, and died in the same shadows, just as dangerous, just as cunning, and now nearly forgotten. Today, we uncover the stories of two of them, men who blurred the boundary between good and evil and left their mark on the Wild West in ways history tried to erase. These are the forgotten outlaws of the American frontier. You're watching Forgotten Meridian, where history fades beyond the line of time. I, Mysterious Dave Mather, the lawman you couldn't trust. His name was David Allen Mather, but across the saloons and dusty streets of the frontier, people whispered another name, Mysterious Dave. He was born in 1851 in Saybrook, Connecticut, a world away from the gunfights and desert towns that would define him. His father, Ulysses Mather, was a sea captain, a man who vanished into the Atlantic one day and never came back. His mother died soon after, and by the age of 10, Dave was already an orphan. A child who learned early that trust was a luxury and the world only remembered the ruthless. He grew up hard, angry, and quiet. By 19, he was working aboard cargo ships, traveling from the calm harbors of New England to the chaos of New Orleans. Then, sometime around 1872, he vanished, leaving no trace until he reappeared halfway across the country in the most notorious boomtown in America, Dodge City, Kansas. There, Dave Mather found what he'd been searching for, a place where no one asked questions and reputation was built from the barrel of a gun. At first, he worked as a buffalo hunter with his brother Josiah, then as a gambler, a saloon drifter, a hired gun. But Dave had something most outlaws didn't: restraint. He watched, waited, and calculated. His silence unnerved people. His eyes were dark, cold, and unreadable. He rarely smiled, rarely spoke. And when he did, it was only to make a deal or a threat. That's how he earned his name, Mysterious Dave. In 1878, he began moving in dangerous company. Among his friends was a man destined for legend, Wyatt Earp. Together, they ran small cons in Texas and Kansas, selling fake gold bricks, manipulating gamblers, and walking the thin line between deputy and desperado. Dave admired Earp, not for his morality, but for his control. He wanted the same thing: authority without accountability. By 1879, Mather was wearing a badge, a deputy marshal in East Las Vegas, New Mexico. But even with the law on his side, he didn't change his ways. He simply learned how to make the law work for him. One cold night in January 1880, trouble came to town. 4 men refused to surrender their guns at a saloon door, a small rebellion that turned into a bloodbath. When Mather arrived, shots were already flying. His partner, Marshal Joe Carson, was killed instantly, but Dave didn't flinch. He drew both his Colts and opened fire. When the smoke cleared, 2 men were dead, 1 was wounded, and the rest had fled. The newspapers called him a hero. The town called him Marshal, and for a time he believed it. But power on the frontier never lasted long. Whispers began that Mather was taking bribes, that he was running scams with known criminals, that he was still playing both sides. Within weeks, the man who'd saved the town was being accused of helping destroy it. Then, as if destiny itself were testing him, a rival appeared: Thomas Nixon, the new assistant city marshal of Dodge City. The 2 men despised each other. Mather saw Nixon as corrupt, Nixon saw Mather as a fraud, and in the end, they both proved each other right. In 1884, the tension finally erupted. A shouting match outside a saloon turned to gunfire. Nixon fell dead in the dust, 4 bullets in his back, fired by none other than Mysterious Dave. He claimed self-defense. The jury acquitted him, and once again, the law looked the other way. But his time was running out. He drifted from town to town, arrested for theft in Texas, counterfeiting in Kansas, murder in Nebraska. Each time he slipped through the cracks, disappearing before anyone could bring him to justice. By 1887, he was gone, vanished without a trace. Some said he fled west to California, then north to Canada, where he joined the Royal Mounted Police under a false name. Others believed he was killed by moonshiners in Tennessee. A few whispered that he lived to old age, quietly tending bar under another man's face. No grave was ever found. No obituary was written. Just a name whispered by the wind across old saloon doors. Mysterious Dave, a man who spent his life chasing power and vanished the moment he found it. 2. Tiburcio Vásquez, the bandit who called himself a patriot. While Mather's story began in the lawless plains, Tiburcio Vásquez's story began in the heart of old California, before it was even part of the United States. He was born in 1835 in Monterrey, back when California was still Mexican territory. His family was old Californio nobility, descendants of Spanish settlers, farmers, and soldiers who had built the land long before the stars and stripes ever flew above it. When the United States annexed California in 1848, everything changed. Land was seized, families displaced. The Californios once respected became strangers in their own home. For young Tiburcio, that humiliation burned deep. He watched his family's wealth disappear, saw his people treated as outcasts in the land they built. And so he did what many broken men do. He became an outlaw. He was quick with a gun, charming, fluent in both English and Spanish, and utterly fearless. By 17, he was already following his cousin, a bandit named Anastasio Garcia, robbing travelers along the mountain roads of Monterey County. At first, his crimes were simple: horse theft, highway robbery, but over time, they became something more. Vásquez began to see himself not as a criminal, but as a kind of avenger, a symbol of resistance against the Americans who had taken his homeland. He called his crimes justice. His victims called it terror. He was arrested several times, serving sentences in San Quentin prison, where he escaped and was caught again, each time emerging harder, smarter, more dangerous than before. By the 1870s, he led a full-fledged gang, a mix of Mexican and Californio outlaws, who rode under the desert sun, raiding ranches, stagecoaches, and small towns from Fresno to Los Angeles. They became legends, and their leader, Tiburcio Vásquez, was seen by some as a folk hero, by others as a blood-soaked murderer. In 1873, his gang robbed Snyder's store in San Benito County, killing 3 men. A $15,000 bounty was placed on his head, a fortune at the time, but Vásquez didn't hide. He taunted the law. He wrote poems and love letters. He played guitar at dances and courted women wherever he went. He was as much a performer as a bandit. Handsome, educated, vain, and addicted to admiration. When the pressure grew too great in the north, he fled south through Kern County and the deserts of Antelope Valley, resting in canyons and at ranches that would later bear his name. The locals adored him. To them, he was a Robin Hood figure, a man fighting for the dignity of the dispossessed. They hid him, fed him, and warned him when the law came too close. But his charm was his downfall. In 1874, hiding at a ranch in present-day West Hollywood, he fell in love with his host's niece. When she became pregnant, the family turned him in. He was captured without a fight, his last refuge betrayed by love. In jail, Vásquez gave interviews to the press. He insisted he was no killer, that he robbed only to reclaim what was taken from his people. The papers called him the Californio bandit. Women came to visit him, bringing flowers and taking his photograph like a celebrity. But the law saw him for what he was, a symbol of defiance that had to be erased. He was convicted of murder and sentenced to hang. On March 19, 1875, Tiburcio Vásquez climbed the gallows in San Jose, dressed immaculately, calm as ever. His final words were, "I am innocent. I forgive all." The trapdoor fell, and with him went the last breath of California's old identity, the world before the frontier. Today, the rocks where he once hid, the Vásquez Rocks in Los Angeles County, still bear his name. Their sharp ridges rise from the desert, like the bones of an old rebellion. He remains a contradiction, a hero to some and a criminal to others, and to history, a ghost that never chose a side. The Wild West was built by such contradictions. Men like Mather and Vásquez, lawmen who became outlaws, outlaws who called themselves heroes. Each chased their own kind of freedom, and each paid for it in blood. The frontier wasn't just a place, it was an idea, a testing ground for ambition, greed, courage, and pride. And when the dust finally settled and it left behind men like these, forgotten names buried under the legends that outshined them. But history remembers in whispers, and if you listen long enough, you can still hear them. Riding the wind through the canyons, their ghosts following the old trails, their stories fading beyond the line of time. This was Forgotten Meridian, where history never truly dies. It just waits to be found again. Subscribe and keep the memory alive.